Good day, everyone. I'm Brian Jeffords. I'm the CRO of RKON. Today with me, I have two of the members of our security team. To my right is Gerard Honorado, our Chief Information Security Officer, and our Director of Identity and Access Management, Dwayne Klaus. Super excited for you all to be here. And we're going to talk about a little bit about identity and access management. It's been on the topic of all of our customers that we go in today and see. They're going through zero trust journeys, they're improving into cloud platforms, and they're really trying to understand where we're going with identity and access management. It's been around a long time, but now we're seeing an evolution of changes. So what are you seeing that's coming to the forefront in the rise of IAM, identity and access management, when it comes to zero trust?
Well, zero trust has always been kind of a buzzword for the past few years. And I think it's finally becoming the reality that companies are looking at zero trust not just as a concept, but looking at it as these are things that we need to do to be more adaptable to the landscape of security that we're going through right now. We can talk about AI threats, et cetera. All that plays into a better approach with zero trust allows for a better security posture for our customers.
Understanding that zero trust has been with us for a long time and customers are going through a long journey. You mentioned AI and the AI threats. How is that impacting our customers today?
I think what was really happening with AI is it's bringing out previously weak practices in organizations. So it's driving more integration with identity controls around previously existing issues like controls around data. And it's driving more integration with tools such as your SIEMs and your SOARs to protect the data and get a better handle around the controls that you have in-house, so that as AI goes out and begins to grab up data and index data, you're not exposing that data internally to members of the organization that you don't want to have access to that information.
Gerard, you mentioned buzzwords, and there's always, cybersecurity, there's always something new, there's always an evolving threat. What do you see of the biggest emerging trend that's gaining the most traction today?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of emerging trends in IAM. Dwayne and I were talking about that yesterday over dinner. One of the biggest emerging trends we're seeing organizations adopting right now is passwordless authentication, right? IAM is always moving forward. So there's a lot of things being adopted, but passwordless authentication is very strong right now. We're seeing a lot of adoption because it really helps increase the user experience. It's one of the great additions to IAM that doesn't just make you more secure, but it also improves the user experience. And IAM can be a source of friction very often. So this is a source of not only helping security, but it also reduces user friction.
Well, and also many times as humans, a lot of times we use the same password. So with passwordless, it takes that human habit out of that equation and helps it.
Absolutely.
Dwayne, we talk about identity and access management and it comes through around regulations, right? Yes. So whether it be HIPAA or different regulations, how is identity and access management becoming more prevalent with regulations today?
Well, regulations has always been a main driver for identity and access management. So a lot of companies use regulations to drive their identity practices or their programs. So I don't think that's going to change. That's always going to be there. Regulations are going to be updated. New emerging threats are going to happen. How do you respond to that? You're talking about evolving technologies earlier. Identity threat detection and response now becoming more identity focused to be more like security focused. So when you're looking at your SIEMs, your SOARs, et cetera, identity is now playing a part of that. So that's kind of where we're seeing the regulatory is more now not just a checkbox, but really just about this has to be done. So if you want cyber insurance, you have to implement technology that's identity focused with others as well, of course. But that's really regulations is always going to be evolving the same way the technology and identity is going to evolve with it.
And we saw that thing about early regulations with PCI and some other things. And now as regulations grow, controls become more stricter and cyber insurance gets more of a handle on what they need to validate or show before they can insure is becoming apparent. And I think it's good to know that Identity access management continues to be such a big driver. Many years, identity access management, Gerard, that you said has been around for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about many point products. We've talked about many products evolving into platforms, and then platform being such a buzzword today, we're seeing the platforms adopt, like Microsoft, identity into their platforms.
Mhm.
So what are the best common identity and access management products or technologies out there that are really positioned to handle customers' needs of the enterprise?
Okay, I think the strongest players are still the big players that everyone knows, right? But you're seeing a lot of emerging players now, especially in kind of the niche markets. Your strongest players are going to be the ones who have really layered in the cross capabilities, those strong capabilities, not in passwordless, in conditional access, in identity threat detection. And those are your Microsofts. You're going to see your Oktas and your Pings. But there are strong players coming up in the IGA world, in the PAM world, in the ITDR, in the threat detection world, as Dwayne said. You really got to look at what your organization needs and what your particular use cases are. But by and large, many organizations are sticking with the big players because while they may not have every feature they need, they have most of the features they need. They're strong, they're reliable, and they're dependable organizations. So and they are coming up and they're adding those features on a regular basis.
We see more and more features come together. They go up a, so to speak, stack of identity, and they're looking for, ITDR is a big thing. Gartner talks about it a lot. It's a really big market share that we're trying to get. How is that becoming prevalent in some of the newer technologies today?
So, ITDR, ISPM, so identity threat detection response, identity security posture management. Those are kind of the newer buzzwords that I mentioned earlier. But again, they're becoming very important for our customers and our enterprises. They're interested in it. They really need to know what the features are. They want to understand what the objectives are and what do they get out of it from a cost perspective. So looking at that, those are things that are going to stay. And talking about vendors, there are niche players out there that are going to play in that space, but they're all going to kind of evolve and converge at some point to where you're looking at identity more as a security issue and not an identity issue, and vice versa. So when you see your SIM tools or your cloud tools, things like that, you'll see products like Wiz come up that are focused on kind of helping the identity space, plus working at the security level as well. So that's not going to change, and that's something that the enterprises are looking at. And like you talked about passwordless, concept to reality, the concept of ITDR, ISPM, it's going to become reality quickly because of the acceleration in AI threats and things of that nature, where you have to have something that's adaptable and able to address those type of threats immediately, real time.
Right. I agree. And I think we're finding with the ITDR space, initially years ago, we talked about authentication, then we went to password, then we went to PAM, privileged access management, and now you're seeing identity coming to the forefront of being more proactive and giving insight to the organization, because many of the identity is, as we all talk about it, is the perimeter, not only the people, but the non-human identities that we have.
Well, I think that's a good point. And customers, and I've seen this over the past 20 plus years that, we've been doing this in Gerard as well, is that companies are still in that reactive mode. How do you become more proactive? And if you look at ITDR, ISPM, things of those, tools like that, that's where you start to become more proactive and not reactive. So you're not seeing a breach, post, you're actually real time looking at it and able to adapt to it quickly.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of ITDRs really feed into the tools, to the SIM and the SOAR, and to really, get that correlation and coordination. So we're seeing that evolve in the market.
Yes.
Gerard, we do a lot in the private equity space, and we do a lot of mergers and acquisitions on the buy and sell side. If it's private equity or on the enterprise, how is identity impacting a merger and acquisition? How is that becoming to the forefront and being so critical?
So identity in the mergers and acquisition space can really be an accelerator to the completion of that merger, or done improperly, it can really slow down that activity. right? Because you have to, with a merger, right? You have to join these directories. There are a number of mechanisms to do that. And when an organization like RKON has done this many times, you have a lot of tricks up your sleeve, right? Whether it's federating or merging the directories, whatever the combination of things are to make that happen. Right? And then when you're divesting, you're doing the exact opposite, right? You have to know how to get those identities effectively separated from the organizations. And if you have legacy applications, legacy entitlements, you have to know how to move those applications and the associated identities out of there. And if you can't do that effectively, you can slow the entire deal down. So
and that creates more cost, right? Because it'll slow the deal down. But if it doesn't happen, if it happens post acquisition, now they're running both environments. That skews up the cost. That's the evaluation that's eating it in. So there's a lot of cost in a merger and acquisition. So I appreciate that point. We have a lot of, going back to platforms for a minute, we have a lot of platforms and a lot of the main players in identity come out to us with adding more and more features. Sometimes more and more features are good enough. Some of them, they need to be separated. Where are you seeing some of the pain points in some of the larger platforms, or not pain points, but maybe the lessons learned that you've seen happen?
Yeah, every platform has its own pain points, right? When you look at something like Microsoft Entra, let's say, right? You have Active Directory internally, you have Entra kind of externally, let's say, and that can get tricky when you're merging both platforms, right? Especially when you're kind of layering things like conditional access and legacy application support. So you have to really learn how to juggle those two together. Okta, great for access management, but it can scale, especially with things like policy sprawl, right? When you're doing that. SailPoint's a great governance tool, right? It's among the best, but you can really get tied down with maintaining your roles within SailPoint. And I think the key there is, well, every one of these tools is very, very good, and they do what they do very, very well. Every tool has its own idiosyncrasies. So when an organization has experience running it or deploying it, they'll know those. But when an organization is beginning to deploy those, they can really benefit from using an organization that's seen that, and that can prepare them for that particular idiosyncrasy.
Yeah, and we help clients all the time kind of navigate that transition into platforms or best of breed solutions, a legacy term. What are you seeing? Like, I think moving to the platform takes some of the costs out of the operation, because the more different technologies you have to have that number of staff on board that understands that. And I think the platform is reducing cost of the operating of people running it themselves, or even us that manage many of these services, that we can do standardize and improve our people to be sharper, faster, and better on that.
Yep.
Thank you. How do enterprise, complex environments, there's hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, how do you begin to manage? Because you throw in non-human identities, NHI, which is a big buzzword today. And where do you see that complex? How do you start just to get your arms around it?
Well, NHI or non-human identities or machine identities, whatever the company wants to call it or the industry wants to call it these days, it has been around for a while. I mean, it's always been a challenge as well.
Well, we do like to change the buzzwords in cybersecurity many times.
We do, but non-human identity is now kind of covers the full spectrum. But the challenge with non-human identities, of course, is always just that, least privileged, it's over privileged. There's a lot of issues with rotation. Companies are not looking at their non-human identities like they look at their human identities. So you're always going to see that sprawl happening. The best way is always the old school way of, you've got to get your hands around what do you currently have today. Don't let technology kind of drive that. What's your business processes? Do you need 1,000 non-human identities? Scale that back, figure out where you're at from a baseline assessment, and then start to figure out what your processes are, your policies are against that. And then start to use tools to help you align that better for the future. So you're always going to have a problem with that unless you get your arms around it.
Yeah, and as we started back, identity was just a contractor for third party or the people within our organization. Now it's machines and appliances and third party use and everything. I think that's why we're seeing ITDR being such a relevant in the market, because you're seeing that identification to help us somehow stay not even ahead, but stay afloat of actually when third parties are engaged, contractors are engaged, and there's seen many partner ecosystems today deliver that outcome. And we have to be responsible, or companies have to be responsible for what happens, either non-human or human identity concerns.
Yeah, and I would just add to that real quickly that, from a non-human identity perspective, ITDR, or Identity Threat Detection Response, does well in that area because it looks at the network layer. So it's looking at the network and saying, what is traversing from the access path across that network, so you can actually see those machine identities in real time and not just going into a database and figuring out, okay, so what do I have or what I don't have. You can actually see it physically from a network access path.
And I'll tell you, from a CISO perspective, what scares me the most about non-human identities, and Dwayne alluded to it a moment ago, is that companies lose track of non-human identities much quicker. And they tend not to rotate those passwords. They tend often, especially in the past, to hard code those secrets, the passwords or the secrets, into those accounts. And those become major security holes within an organization. So there are great tools out there. There are great mechanisms to manage those now. They've been around for a while, but organizations tend to have ignored them.
And many times we always talk about the human is maybe the weakest chain sometimes in the link. But when passwords aren't changed and they're the factory password of the non-human identity, that just continues. A human will continue to impact that and make it less than that.
Absolutely.
Well, that goes back to process. A lot of companies that we deal with, it's not a technology issue, it's a process issue. So going to key rotation, whatever it is from an identity perspective, excuse me, it's about process. Technology is only doing what you tell it to do, per se. So that, as long as companies are working towards fixing their people process problem, let technology do its thing.
I think that's a good point. And then you all have had more than 25 years in identity access management. RKON continues to evolve our identity access management practice, whether it be through the people, process, and technology, or through managed services. How do you think it would make it easier for if someone leveraged RKON? Because I think you guys bring a lot of experience and knowing all the technologies to that. I know we have a lot more exciting stuff coming up that we'll be announcing around identity access management. So if you can share some insight, that would be great.
To go on.
Sure. I think what RKON can really bring to the table is not just the technical experience. We certainly have that. We have a great team that goes from the implementation of, be it Active Directory or Entra or Okta, or, take your pick, right? And operating that at the network level and at the workforce level, to the operationalization of identity and access management. As Brian said, Dwayne, myself, we've run identity and access management practices for 20, 25 years. And we have operationalized identity and access management in all its forms across some of the largest enterprises in the world. And we've seen how those programs run and how those programs fail. And we can bring that, and our team can bring that to an organization, big or small, and size that appropriately and right size any IAM program and really kind of help those organizations succeed.
I appreciate that. I know that when I'm talking to a lot of our clients today, identity and access management not only is one of their biggest issues, and we've been able to show some really great success to help them with lessons learned or from a reduced cost out of the whole transition. And I think important to know, the more technologies we're familiar with, the more we can help our customers. Mm-hmm. Gerard and Dwayne, I want to thank you today. I hope you all got a chance to learn more about identity access management practice. We appreciate your time, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.